Hey, Craig, it's wonderful to meet you, sir. Thank you for taking a minute out today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get into your work, I want to know first and foremost, 5 years ago, this pandemic changed our worlds, changed our lives. How did you get through the pandemic era, and how has it affected your life today in 2025?
Well, it was an interesting time, of course. It made me very glad that I live in the middle of the woods. I mean, literally,
Yeah.
can't see another house. So we were very isolated. It was very safe back in here. Um, but in terms of how it changed my life, it was really two things. I'm a college professor,
Mhm.
have been for a long time, and it's really fundamentally changed how we do higher ed.
Yeah.
For decades, traditional schools kind of pretended that online education really wasn't a good thing. And then we were forced into it
Hmm.
and had to kind of say, well, yeah, this is okay. And so it's led to a lot more online teaching. I don't do much of that myself, but my university, Louisiana Tech University, does a lot more now. And I think schools across the world really do. But the other thing for me that was even more interesting was it made me realize I can work at home. So, college professors don't have set 9 to 5 type schedules.
Yeah.
I was always 4 days a week in the office. So I would go to campus, even if I was only teaching 2 days a week, and teach and go in and work 4 days a week, sometimes five, because I didn't feel like I could work at home. Well, during COVID, I didn't have any choice. And it's like, oh, actually, I get a lot more done when I stay home than if I go in. You know how it is when you go in an office and you chat and somebody stops by and you go out to lunch and all of that sort of thing. And so that was the most surprising thing for me. I also think it made us realize how resilient we are.
Yeah.
It was a pretty freaky time, but we got through it.
It's interesting. That's the thing that strikes me the most about that time period was resiliency. My son is on the spectrum, and the two things that he loves the most to this day is school and baseball. And in that time in March, school stopped and baseball came to an end. And I was just like, what are we going to do? But you find a way. I mean, human
Yeah.
beings, like when you hear these stories of people that get found on rafts after a couple of weeks of very scant food and water, the level of DNA, the Darwinian evolution of our makeup is amazing, and what we can do and how we can survive.
Right.
So, um, so let me ask you this: along with teaching, you're a writer, but if I was to put your feet to the fire and put you in front of a bunch of 12-year-olds, it's career day, and the curious kid in the back of the room is like, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
So I would say I teach people and I figure things out.
Okay.
So that's really what I do is I teach just exactly like their teachers teach them, just at a different level. So that's how I spend a good chunk of my time. And I have kind of an odd schedule. One year I teach all doctoral students, and the next year I teach all undergraduates.
Okay.
It's the way the programs are set up. So it doesn't matter where you are, I'm going to try to help you get a good start with your professional life. And then the research side of it, I literally just try to figure stuff out. There's some question that pops into my mind. I have a conversation with somebody. It's like, I wonder why this is the way it is. While I started out, why do people use computers or not use computers? Pretty simple, but it leads to all kinds of other questions. And I try to figure them out, answers to those questions in a systematic way. And that's it. That's what I do.
So I'm curious, how do you undulate between teaching doctoral students and then undergrad? How is that kind of chiseled and fine-tuned your approach to teaching?
So it's kind of interesting, at least it is to me. Maybe it isn't to anybody else, but it is to me.
Yeah.
So when I teach undergrads, these days I teach one of those junior level core classes that everybody has to take,
Hmm.
the ones that everybody hates.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in here. And so I can, when I'm dealing with those kinds of students, it's all about relevance. This is why this is relevant. Here are kind of the things you need to know. Here are the things you need to know how to do because you're going to go out in the world and do something and try to do that something without computers.
Yeah.
And so you better pay attention to this stuff. I temper my expectations.
Yeah.
Look, I'm old, but I'm not so old that I can't remember what it was like to sit through those same kinds of classes when I was an undergrad.
Yeah.
And so I don't let, if somebody doesn't turn in the homework, all right, you get a zero.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll
Yeah.
both move on with our days. With the doctoral students, I don't have to worry about motivation.
Yeah.
So that's all about pushing them and challenging them, in addition to equipping them with the knowledge and tools they're going to need to be successful academics. So I really try to level it. Just like you're talking to a kid, you're talking to an adult, you can talk about the same things, but you just change how you talk about it.
Do you remember the first college classroom you walked into with and the way it felt when you got out at the end of that first session?
Yeah, I kind of do. The first one I remember was a big giant auditorium Psych 101
Okay.
class. And, it was exactly what you would, if you've ever been in one of those classes, you know exactly what I mean.
Uh-huh.
300 students, 200 students, right there, guy up talking at us. But I was excited. I've always liked learning. That's why I'm in the profession I'm in. So
Yeah.
I just thought it was really neat to start to learn this stuff.
I went to the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and my first class was Psych 101, but it was in a smaller room. And I remember the amount of material that was presented in that hour. It was so dense. And I remember how much reading we got. And coming from high school, it was like, wait, 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 wait. What are you
Yeah,
talking about?
yeah.
It was unreal. Um, so what did you want to be when you were 12 years old? What was your dream life?
I have no recollection of exactly what I wanted to be at that age. I'm
Yeah.
sure it was wanting to be a football player or something like that. But I kind of, I kind of fell into the professor idea pretty early on. I remember in high school, when you take the SATs or ACTs, you fill out what do you want to do when you grow up.
Yeah.
And I remember putting college professor, although I was going into engineering school. I mean, I put college professor on there. And I don't know, I've just always liked trying to figure things out.
Yeah.
And so I'm one of those, I was one of those kids, according to my parents, that would just sit there and watch things, and so that's kind of how I fell into it.
So let's go back to your beginnings, how you got the moniker, part redneck, part philosopher as a PhD. What were the foundational elements that gave you this love of learning, of philosophy, of obviously animals and nature and living in the woods? How did all of these elements come in to become who you are?
Well, so the philosophy came about in a really roundabout way. So let me tap that one a little bit later. I was very fortunate to be a military kid. So until I was in, I think, fifth grade, my father was in the Army, bounced around, every 3 years or so, you moved, you meet new kids,
Yeah.
and everybody was new. So it wasn't that big a deal. Then when he retired, moved to Florida, I went to a high school that was about as diverse as you could get. So we were literally about 25% African American, about 25% Hispanic, about 50% white, but that the white kids were kind of broken into the rich kids, the rednecks, and the former military kids.
Yeah.
And so you just kind of got to the point where you could get along with anybody. And so, some of the redneck kids, I mean, they were terrible in school, but, if you needed to fix your car or if you needed to do some other stuff, they could do it. So it occurred to me that they're not dumb.
Hmm.
They're just smart in different ways than maybe I'm smart. But then I was in advanced classes, so I was in with the kids who were really sharp academically and played sports, so I knew the black kids. And, it was just one of those kind of things. And so I realized that there's not a single way to view the world. And that's where this kind of redneck philosopher thing comes in. And then, as I said, I've always tried to figure out stuff. And I didn't realize I was doing philosophy. Um, when this is a little bit of a downer story, but my first wife contracted cancer. When it was diagnosed, it was stage 4. There was just nothing to be done.
Wow.
And so I spent 2.5 years taking care of her, not worrying about all the things I couldn't control, but thinking about what can I control right now.
Yeah.
All right, she's starting to have trouble walking. Let's get a cane. The cane's not cutting it anymore. Let's get a walker. Now let's get a scooter and let's get a wheelchair van and, just whatever I could do, and didn't worry about why she had cancer or any of the thousands of other things I couldn't control. Well, many years later, I realized that's the core idea of Stoicism. And so then I started reading more philosophy, Stoicism, Aristotle, a little bit of Buddhism, just whatever kind of was of interest to me. And that's where I started to blend this practical kind of redneckism with this deeper, enduring philosophical side. So that's kind of the long and short of it.
It's interesting the contrasts and the parallelisms you're pulling in. It reminds me of what we're living through in this political era that we have going on right now, kind of this
Yeah.
difference between both parties and how they think, and how one thinks they think this way and the other thinks they think this way, but there's so much gray area, like you said, because at the end of the day those guys could fix and do anything, and they just allocated, they were using different parts of their brain, but they were
Right.
still using, it's interesting. So let me ask you this: who has been kind of that overarching inspirational force, that hero for you in your life, that's allowed you to evolve and become who you are today?
I don't know that I could point to a single hero. I've always kind of taken my wisdom where I can find it. So I'm a big fan of the Stoics. Especially Seneca, big fan of Aristotle, the way he thought. But, I also look around at everyday people and kind of see where they're coming from. And so I listened to some of your episodes earlier, and I knew this kind of a question was coming, but I really don't have a good answer. I mean, I've never had, that this is my guiding light that's going to get me where I want to get to this
Yeah.
person. It's more been a blend of as many people as I can pull wisdom from.
Yeah. It's interesting when I think about those early philosophers, and I think about, like, I've been to, different structures in Europe, and you wonder how they, engineering wise, how they thought about how they got that at that point and that primitive way of building things. So my question to you is this: as somebody that's an educator and a thinker, do you believe that the level of distraction was low enough at that point where there could be philosophical thought, there could be real, true, original thought that was going on at that time, that's so contrasting to what we live now?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I've read some things that talk about how life was so different, hundreds of years ago and today. Hundreds of years ago, you kind of did one thing. Now we do 50 different things. If you were a farmer, you farmed. If you were a mason, you built stuff. If you were a philosopher, you thought about stuff. And I'm exaggerating there, of course,
Sure.
but I think today, I mean, I've got three screens up here right now in front of me. And
Yeah.
it's just like, modern life is this ping pong ball. And I think it's a big problem for us to not take the time to really focus, do that deep thinking and that deep work that's so important. But, that's just the way life is. And I
Yeah.
suspect that, Aristotle was complaining about his students not, being hungover when he was giving his lectures. And so I don't know, things are the same, things are different. And who knows who will be the great thinkers from today, looking back 500 years from now.
Well, I just listened to a book by Cornell West, and it's like every time I listen or I read him, I have to take a minute. It's like reading Billy Collins' poetry. Like, it's just so dense, it's so good. And there are thinkers that are doing those things, but I think there is a point where there's so many distractions, like just doing social media and doing very minor things. It's like people are just interjecting all of these things, but I think there was an era where people were just more with themselves and their community and their surroundings, and they weren't distracted all the time.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. But what's interesting is that in those eras, it was also a very limited group of people.
Yeah.
that had the luxury to think about those kinds of things. You know, most people were just trying to survive.
Yeah.
You know, you're worried about the drought or the animals have moved on or whatever it was. And so today, I think that we have many, many more people that have the luxury of leisure time to think about some of these things. But now we've got these distractions.
Yeah.
So, and you know, the attention economy is a real problem,
Yeah.
I mean, when it comes to thinking. But
But it's interesting too that um, we live in an era. If Aristotle could come back and see how far medicine has come, to see the fact that we can shoot a rocket into space and put somebody on another celestial body, just all of those things, we are definitely living in an era where we are full of creature comforts and things are happening in a way that we've never could even imagine.
well, I was having lunch with a philosopher, and he made the point that somebody that's even moderately well off today, I mean, like lower middle class, in a lot of ways is living better than the kings and queens of 500 or 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, better food, better water, better health care, better pretty much everything.
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, that's a pretty good point.
Yeah. There was a good friend of mine that does senior level IT work, and he went to New Delhi around the beginning of the year, and he was talking to me about air quality out there. And it's really bad. Like you have to wear an N95, and it's like you literally have to close windows in the summertime, even if it's hot, because it's so bad. And I think about in this kind of war of environmentalism and things in preserving our environment, we really have gone to great lengths to preserve water and air and things like that. Because I just looked on my phone at the air quality of New Delhi when he was telling me this. And then I just looked at Kansas City and I was like, oh my, it was
Okay.
stark. So, there's just things I think that we need to keep in mind. Sometimes the media pounds and hammers this dark side in, you know?
Yeah. And that, I mean, I'm kind of an environmentalist in a lot of ways. I mean, I
Yeah.
bought 20 something acres behind us, so it can never be developed,
Yeah.
you know, and it's not old growth forest or anything like that. Lumber is a crop around here.
Yeah.
Um, so in my own little way, I mean, I'm not extreme about it, but I think we need to remember how far we've come. I can remember visiting my uncle in Akron, Ohio in the late 60s. You know, that was Rubber Town, USA, or something they called it. You know, Goodyear and Firestone and all those companies were right there making tires. And Cleveland had, you know, the Cuyahoga River catching fire, and South Georgia, North Florida, paper mills. You know, you could go on and on and on.
Yeah.
And now it's shocking to see trash on the side of the road.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, wow, somebody threw a cup out of their window. When I was a kid, everybody threw stuff out of the windows.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, there's still a lot to be done, and we can't lose sight
Yeah.
of the importance of the environment. But I think every once in a while, to your point, it's like, yeah, it used to be a whole lot worse. And if you've ever been to some of the developing countries, I spent a month in India, and it's not good over there.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. As an educator, my wife has been in education. My day job, I work IT for a school district. So I watch this education environment all the time. She was taught fifth grade for 20 plus years, and now she's in high school English. And it's amazing to me how many kids will invite her to weddings. And there's even one kid that was in her class in the fifth grade, and he's a comedian now, hanging out with Kevin Hart. And just how these humans flower and become who they are. What has been one of the greatest, like, student stories that came back to you and blew you away based on how they grew and became in life?
You know, there's not one that stands out,
Yeah.
but there's kind of a composite. So this is a good thing about social media. Just yesterday, I heard from a student that I had 25 years ago. You know, and there are these students that I'm still connected with that I know for a fact that I changed the trajectory of their lives. Now,
Yeah.
maybe not in a big way, but in some small way. My work with the doctoral students is really major there. It's going into academia. It's a strange world,
Yeah.
or it is a strange world, and really preparing them to really have those. the successful careers that we want them to have. But that's the way I look at it is, I've usually been at big schools with big classes, and so it's not the kind of a thing where you build a really intimate relationship with a small number of students.
Yeah.
So I look at it as the effect I had on large numbers of students.
Yeah.
Some no effect whatsoever, but enough of them. I still hear from students from 20, 25 years ago that said, you're the best professor I ever had.
Yeah.
Now, maybe they're telling that to all of their old professors. I don't know, but you had to have some impression or make some impression to make them feel that way.
So after all of these years of teaching all of these students, what motivates you every day to get up to do this work?
So my purpose in life is helping other people lead successful, meaningful lives.
Yeah.
However they may define success, however they may find meaning. And being an educator is a great way to do that. And so whether it's one of my doctoral students, one of my undergraduate advisees, one of my students who's trying to find an internship, you know, that's my chance.
Yeah.
Here's a chance for me to help this student move in the direction they want to move or figure out something about what they want to do with their lives. And when I teach undergrads, I have 250 to 300 students a year.
Yeah.
That's a lot of impact potentially.
Yeah.
And I don't know too many other professions where you can do that.
Yeah.
So that's what I love about it. And then my research in different ways makes a little bit of difference out there in the world too.
Yeah.
Um, very far removed, and you never know about that impact. But
Yeah. So let me ask you this. When I was in college, I wanted to get into the media, and I had an upper level media class. And my teacher, Pierre Renier, was a real hard nosed. He treated us like we were in the media, like we were in the newsroom at CNN. And I remember at one point I had to go into his room for a meeting, and there was all these posters of Australia, and he just was a total different personality. He was talking about traveling there, and he just was a human to me. It wasn't like he wasn't before, but there was a level of him that had to scare us. And you guys want to get in the media? Okay, I'll show you what it's like.
yeah.
So my question to you is this: if you could get into a room of all of the students that you've taught over the years that have had this perception of you as a professor, and you could tell them a fun story, the first concert you went to, one of the greatest places that you ever traveled to on the planet, just a magic moment, a great story, what would you tell that room?
So I would have to do a fair amount of filtering because there are lots of stories that really should not be told in public.
Yeah, right. I get it.
Um, and this is going to sound really weird, but my wife tells me I look very unapproachable.
Yeah.
I have this scowl on my face much of the time. I have my mother had one of those composite pictures,
Yeah.
with every school picture, and 10 out of 12 of them, I'm scowling at the camera. And then she digs up a picture of me as maybe a 1 year old and my older brother. I'm scowling in that picture. So it's like, yeah, that may be what I project, but it's not really my personality.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might be the safest one to tell,
I
but
like it. I totally get what you're saying. I dig it. So let me ask you this. Of all of the things that you've accomplished in your life, what are you the proudest of?
I'm proudest of the doctoral students I'm sending out into the world
Yeah.
because they're a force multiplier. So if I help them learn how to be good mentors for their students, and then they can teach their students to be good mentors, it just kind of has that ripple effect that is really hard uh, to to reproduce it. And I've had a great career. So I was a dean for 5 years. Started the first business school-based nonprofit entrepreneurship program in the country. Started the first veteran student center in a business school in the country. Did a lot of good things, but I think the work with the doctoral students where it really lets them go out into the world and multiply the effects is what I would be proudest of.
So let's take the Scow story and let's elongate it and make more sense. I'm going to ask you this. Everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, students, colleagues, everyone that knows you, but you're in control. You run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Um, I'm a dependable wanderer, not wanderer, wanderer.
Yeah,
Yeah, so yeah, I'm very dependable. If I give my word, I'll do everything I can to live up to it. I will help people where I can. I'm one of it's almost that military, mindset. I'm there,
yeah.
and I'll be there. But I'm just a curious guy.
Yeah.
I want to know about people. I want to know about things. I want to know about events. And so I think that's really the core of who I am.
So if anybody wants to pick up your books, anybody wants to look into your research, anything that you're doing, anything in your world, where do they go?
So probably the best place right now is aigoestocollege.com. That's my main focus, how artificial intelligence is affecting higher ed. If they're interested in more of the philosophy side, they can go to livewelandflourish.com.
Okay. Well, we gave everybody a taste here, Craig. This has been wonderful. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your story. Thank you for your time. I loved it. I appreciate it.
Great conversation.
Yes,
And
sir.
I hope your teams do well there in Kansas City. So.
Looking to get new clients to your business through cold calling or email marketing? At Agency Y, they envision a world in which small and big companies have equal chances to win new customers in the market. Their purpose is to bring parity and reduce the gap between large and small firms with the help of their cold calling and cold email marketing services. Use the code Joe Dimino 10 at www.agencyyy.org/coldcallingjoe.php or www.agencyyyy.org/emailmarketingjoe.php to get 10% off your first order. This is Joe Dimino of Neon Jazz and Famous Interviews, and I stand behind Agency Y to meet your business dreams.